Well, on that note, let's go ahead and bring in our next guest, a regular contributor to the show, a geopolitical specialist, and just all over the place. This guy has done so much good work. We look up to him, independent thinker, independent media, just champion all around. Please welcome back to the show, Don DeBar.
Yeah.
You're embarrassing me.
And he makes great meatballs and serves them with Chianti, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just put that out there, too.
How you guys doing?
Very good.
Good,
Very
man.
good, Don.
I'm listening to you talk about this facial recognition and the passports and stuff, and I started raging all of a sudden because I had an image in my face of this friggin' cop in Miami at the airport that took a bottle of Havana Club away from us and poured it out in front of us.
Oh, my God.
Son of a bitch. Anyway.
Oh my God.
I got to check a bag because I can't bring my cream through TSA. They'll take it away from me, you know? And with a kid with eczema, cream is very valuable.
Yeah, man, you need that. Otherwise, you'd be scratching like I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Like we always do.
So what are we going to talk about?
Well, let's start with this. There's so much going on, so many moving parts. We had the tariff war. We got the tariff war going on. China, Trump. We were covering earlier in the show about China exposing the luxury product scam, which was pretty funny. And to see that people waking up every time we have you get on your phone, your devices, they can't stop people from getting on and checking for themselves. So the mainstream media has to continually double down, triple down on all of their spins and keeping their narrative going that China's the bad guy, communism's coming for you. It seems that they're circling back to an oldie but a goodie, back to the Vietnam language. So we saw this today, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Don. So we saw that the China's president has now inked Vietnam deals as the tariff war deepens. Trump says they're trying to screw us. And then we have this shot of them meeting together. So not only a red carpet welcome for Xi Jinping, but the president of Vietnam was there at the airport to receive him. The Vietnamese have understood that the U.S. is too capricious. Stability is pivotal for long-term planning in geopolitics and economy. And I'm going to play this little clip because this is the messaging from the Trump team on Fox News. And then we get your thoughts from a more stable point of view. So here's the unstable Fox News giving us the fear language. It's coming. Vietnam's coming for you. Here we go. This is the trade advisor, Pete Navarro. He's going to tell us what to be afraid of next. Here we go.
Vietnam is essentially a colony of communist China. China uses Vietnam to transship to evade the tariffs. How does that work? Vietnam sells us $15 for every $1 we sell them. And about $5 of that is just Chinese product that comes into Vietnam. They slap a Made in Vietnam label on it, and they send us here to evade the tariffs. But Vietnam is also the biggest dumper and biggest use of export subsidies. I don't know if you saw the clip of that beautiful Louisiana shrimp guy saying, hey, God bless Donald Trump for protecting us. You know who he was protecting him from? Vietnam. And we know that Vietnam dumps stuff. They do export subsidies because of the Department of Commerce. That's the one that slaps on the anti-dumping countervailing duties. So they do that. And then they have the VAT tax. They have a 10% VAT tax. They use some of those phony standards. And the sum and substance of all of this, Jackie, it's like every country around the world cheats us. But it's like fingerprints. They all do it in different ways. But it all comes down to the non-tariff cheating. It was interesting to hear Elon Musk at the beginning talk about a zero tariff zone with Europe. He doesn't understand that. And the thing that's, I think, important about Elon to understand, he sells cars. That's what he does. And if you look, for example, at the Tesla factories in Texas, they're assembly plants, and they get a lot of their content from China, Mexico, Japan, and Taiwan and elsewhere. What President Trump wants to do is turn Detroit back into Detroit instead of having Detroit in Mexico now like they have it.
So, and I'm going to pause there.
Wow.
I think, I mean, it's very hard to listen to this. I'm sure it is for you too, Don. What is this guy up to? This is the spin, right? This is the let's get everybody afraid of China, and now let's throw Vietnam in there as well.
I mean, there's so many. I don't even know where to start. First of all, let's start in Louisiana. what he doesn't mention when he's talking about shrimp and Louisiana and protecting from Vietnam is that a huge number of the shrimpers in Louisiana are Vietnamese. After the war, it was one of the primary places that people relocated from, the U.S. backed South Vietnam to the United States. And they fell into the shrimping business with like both feet and a couple of hands. So he leaves that out when he's talking about the role of Vietnam and shrimpers in Louisiana and all of this. The opinion of the people there, you're talking about the analog of the Cubans in Miami. You ask the Cubans in Miami, maybe not as much now as 20 years ago, what do you think of Cuba and what the Cuban government's doing right now? And, the first thing out of their mouth would be those Castro brothers ruined Cuba and we should kill them and blah, 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 blah. There are lots of folks in Louisiana shrimping that feel that way about Vietnam. So if you're some knucklehead like Peter Navarro talking to them, if you don't understand that context, you're not going to understand. You might be getting a bias from there. That's just that little piece of it. Now, I've always been amazed at the fact that the United States has done a tremendous amount of trading with Vietnam after we bombed the shit out of it and poisoned it and murdered 1 million+ people there over a period of 20 or 30 years, not counting the involvement of the U.S. with the French since 1954 or thereabouts. It is natural that China and Vietnam will have normal relations. There have been historical, contradictions, but in general, they're neighbors, and this is what would happen. By the way, Xi Jinping was in Cambodia yesterday and today or something, doing the same thing. People will complain here about that. Like, number one, how dare Xi Jinping do that, and how dare Cambodia host it? What was the last thing we did to Cambodia? It was to bomb the shit out of Cambodia. I remember Richard Nixon did that, and people, as a matter of fact, people got killed May 4th and May 7th or 14th, I forget, between Kent State and Jackson State.
Yeah, that's right.
Protesting that thing that happened in 1970. The government that was installed in Cambodia pretty much in the aftermath of the U.S. bombing, murdered millions of Cambodians. And if you want to go interview more people, Mr. Navarro, go out to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and interview Cambodians who were there, who also ran out of Cambodia after the United States blew that up. I think I'm focused on that too much. The entire coverage of what's going on between Trump with the announcements and the media coverage around this and the role of tariffs and economies and tariff wars and all this other bullshit. I think you nailed it, Matt, when you said in essence that these guys every day have to have some new stuff, or every 20 minutes, for people to pop in and see on their cell phones. That there's got to be like a constant regurgitation of news headlines and sensational things to happen in order to draw audience. And there's a lot of that going on. The problem, first of all, in dealing with this stuff is that the institutional activity that goes on in the background and just in terms of daily business for international trade and the international politics is so large and larger than it's ever been in history, that also much of it so new that even if there were an honest attempt to keep the education level of the average person on par where they can not just understand in vague terms what these things mean, like tariff and inflation and whatever else, but actually have some understanding of the operations of this giant machine, that it would be difficult or impossible to do if you were really trying. And of course, what's been happening since at least the mid 60s or late 60s is that those people who were doing any kind of, I would say, engineering using education have been using it to dumb down the population, to focus them on tasks that have to do with manufacturing or support for industrial activity, rather than to understand systems operation, do critical thinking, have a good command of history, good command of economics, a good command of commerce, et cetera. So you have a large audience that's tuning into these programs that really doesn't know shit about any of the subject matter. And you're lying to them because there's a handful of people that own all of these outlets that are generating this stuff. And I want to talk about something in a minute about that, by the way. So that own a heavy piece of the actual machinery, and the role of the media is not to inform people about what's happening and how to do it, but rather to manipulate them so that they behave in a way that suits the owners of the machinery in their interactions with it, whether it's as employees or stockholders or customers or whatever. And so the media beats up on Trump all the time. Who knows whether that's a real thing or staged or when it's which. Certainly, there has not been a revolution in the United States. The ownership of the means of production hasn't changed hands whatsoever. The stock prices that they talk about being depressed, suppressed, lifted, inflated, whatever, they may affect millions and millions of people whose pensions and other holdings are through institutional investment houses, like Fidelity or Merrill Lynch or whatever, but they're not within the control of more than a handful of people. Whatever I'm getting out of my pension, for example, I might be able to trade or to command Fidelity to trade this kind of share for that kind of share within a small set. But I don't have a seat on the exchange, and I don't trade millions of shares, and I don't have a group of people doing that in the way that I would say the bulk of the shares that are traded in the indices that we hear about in Dow, S&P, whatever. A small group of people are involved in the machinations of that. That's my point. And so when they say Trump said this and that made the market do that, you're as likely looking at a manipulation intended to deal with some political struggle that's going on outside of our view, or we're seeing a caricature of it, than as being portrayed. So with all of that, I'm looking at what's happening right now. I know that we're still not at war with Russia, and I'm glad about that. And I think that if they had elected Harris for some reason, by some method, whether it was, well, they'll let us go to war or whatever.
You're still holding on to that, Goomba? Get out of here.
I'm not holding on to anything. I think that's true.
Come on. We're at war with Russia, though. All right, go ahead.
No.
Let me. Yeah, go ahead. I hear what you're saying. I don't mean to step on it, but I disagree over there with that.
But okay, noted. Okay. Meanwhile, today, as a matter of fact, Moscow issued a statement. Maria Zakharova and someone else too. Germany is talking about, and Ukraine is talking about using some particular weapon system that comes from Germany to Ukraine, and they're going to be targeting Russia with it. And so Russia announced today, the first time you strike us with that, we're going to consider that an attack on us by Germany. The rhetoric, to the extent that matters, that's been coming from Russia in terms of defining what's going on, and also the description of the history of the struggle there that comes out of some parts of Washington, including out of the White House, is different. And I don't know that would have happened in any event, for what that's worth. The fallout from this economic, it appears to me, and this is going back even to 2014, 2015, 2016, that there's some kind of a reconfiguration of the global economy that some sector would like to see that would correspond more to almost George Orwell's Three Sheaves, with the U.S. more or less taking unequivocal control of the Western Hemisphere, and the EU taking, in essence, its space there and whatever it can maintain in Africa, and Asia, China basically dominating Asia, however that plays out, with Russia and Europe to settle whatever business they have, and the front between those two being in constant tension. This would be a different map. It seems like it is a different map that's being developed already from the one that has been, the result of the post-war order, what we currently call globalism, where and more so than the way it appeared maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when it seemed that Russia was being, in the former Soviet spaces, were being absorbed into the Western economy when they were in the G20 and all of that. I'm looking at what Trump has been doing in terms of trying to the extent that it's happening, contested, if you like, to deconflict with Russia and to focus more on the Western Hemisphere, as basically reflecting the desire of whoever it is that's pulling the strings to secure the Western Hemisphere if they go back to trying to dominate the globe, before they try to do it. It seems that a number of things, if the goal has always been, and it seems to have been, to dominate the planet, that the rise of the BRICS, of China, the contradictions in the Western Hemisphere and in Africa, and somewhat in Asia, that sort of thwarted their attempt to, steamroll or to be in control of it now. That the opposition to that has risen. I would say certainly since 2014, maybe even since the year like 2000. And so that in order to achieve this long-term goal, some sector of the elite believes that they have to sort of regroup, secure themselves here, let the others slug it out and do like they did with World War II and go in and pick up the pieces. That's what it seems to me is motivating. And I don't know any more than anyone else if that's what it actually is. But if something is motivating a change of course, not in terms of we want to own everything and make you all shut up and do what you're told, but the methodology and maybe the sequencing. And I think that's what Trump represents. And in the short term, it appeared that this group was willing to have an actual shooting war with Russia, gambling that it wouldn't grow into a nuclear exchange or a final nuclear exchange. But that, I think that maybe that we've turned away from that possibility in the short term. And I think that's very important.
Can I jump in, my friend?
Yeah, go for it.
Let me, for my last comment before I got to get going. Don, it's great to see you again. Love hanging out and whatnot. We very rarely disagree. And I think we have a little bit of a disagreement here because I see it completely different. And
go ahead.
I just, this whole peace through strength that he's been echoing that I think was made famous from the Gipper, right? I think Ronald Reagan was the one who made that comment or that phrase, very popular. It was around before him, but he used it himself, right? And it's like, why walk lightly, but carry a heavy stick, but make sure they see that stick. It's supposed to meant deterrence, but it really leads to more military spending and buildups. And actually, I think it kind of sidelines if, in fact, it sacks any type of what's the word I'm looking for? Diplomacy, right? Whatsoever. I think that's what happens. You start giving the generals a little bit more power, a little umph, and they want to use it. And I don't think he was ever serious about, I don't know if he was ever serious, but it definitely backfired him and the people he is choosing. I mean, it's once again, it's like Memento, like when he chose Lord John Bolton last time and Elliot Abrams in Latin America to run a lot of the policies over there. These are known warmongers, and he's got these bobbleheads that just say yes, Peter Hegseth and Marco Rubio. Larry Johnson used that term, and I've been using it ever since I heard that. That just they're neocons to the nth degree. If he was ever serious about ending this war in the Ukraine, you don't send Commander Clark Kellogg, right? Is that his name? To go and negotiate for you. The guy is a neocon that's anti-Russia as can be. He spews lies all the time. And what I've seen, the moves that have happened, especially since day 2 when he brought in Sam Altman and Larry Ellison, these guys, these technocrats, these Starlink, Starbright, whatever, programs they have. It's to accelerate into a different type of warfare and a different type of control. That's why we see these digital passports coming in. You don't need these NGOs on the ground doing all the work. Everything is modernized and everything is done technocratically. You know what I'm saying? And that's what's to be brought along. We heard Donald Trump say he would end this war within 24 hours. Now, I know a lot of us thought, you haven't been paying attention if you're really going to believe that you're going to end this war in 24 hours. You might ingest some form of diplomacy and some relationships. The fact that the Biden administration wouldn't even sit down and talk, the Trump administration would, but they can end this war with a phone call. Within 2 weeks, it would be over if he just stopped the funding. And I understand that it was close to $200 billion. I think it was $170 billion that Biden had forked over in weapons and aid to Ukraine. But Donald Trump is still given in the last 4 months, not even 4 months of his presidency, an additional $1 billion. So there's no end in sight whatsoever. I think a lot of the RT people and the Sputnik people are still waiting for these sanctions to be lifted. They thought they'd be lifted by now, especially when Donald Trump got in here. But the important thing, what I see, Don, is I don't see the behavior changing. I still see the U.S. using the same behavior. As to the segment that Matt just brought into play here when it comes to China, it's still more the same. They want to use sanctions, and in this case, Donald Trump used tariffs like sanctions to bully and to push people into doing what they want to do, and they're just not going to play along with it anymore. I think when he starts talking, you hear this guy, Navarro, go on Fox News, and he starts speaking about this is what Vietnam does, and they throw this up here and these tariffs, whatnot, and everything. Well, who's paying the tariffs? It's 99.9% of the time stuff that's made in Vietnam and China, whatnot, are not bought by the American consumer directly from China. They're bought from another company that's here in the United States that's taking advantage of that labor. And as what we're seeing on TikTok and Instagram, I think the Burger Bag one is a big one, Matt. I don't know if you played it the other day. The markup from these people, right? The markup from the companies, the United States. And all China has to do is just turn a mirror on itself. It doesn't have to push back and fight with tariffs. It's just showing you what the capitalists in America are doing to its own citizens. So I really don't see anything different. And I went to a Viet MAGA event here, Vietnamese in Florida, with Kim Iverson. She took me to it, of these people supporting Donald Trump in the United States. And it's a quagmire to me in my mind after we bombed the hell out of it. And by the way, there are still mines that are going off in Cambodia to this day that were put there by the West. To this
Vietnam
day,
too.
they're still going out. A little kids walking in a field, and boom, a mine goes off that was put down in the 70s. So, I mean, the problem we see with the United States is that the relationship hasn't changed. The behavior, of the United States hasn't changed whatsoever. And for anybody thinking that this guy is and I'm not saying that you said this, Don, but other people and supporters have said that this guy, this president, is a president of peace. I mean, holy cow, what's going on in Yemen? I mean, him bragging on a tweet about blowing up a tribal circle of a bunch of Houthis and people in Yemen. I don't see anything changing. I see his attitude towards Latin America escalating. Look what he's saying about Venezuela. If you do business with them, we'll punish you. It's still more of the same. I just see us moving in a modernization of a technocrats coming in, and everything's just getting arranged. It's just smoke and mirrors. And I think that this Ukraine situation might turn out to be Donald Trump's Vietnam. He's already starting to go back and starting to complain. What happened to I'll end it in 24 hours? That's out the window. But now he's starting to echo those words. And this is why so many Republicans were against the war, is because it was Biden's wars. It's Biden's war in Ukraine. It could be used as a political weapon against the Democrats, and that's why they were against that war, but they're not against war. They're for war. They'll go along with any war he's got. And like I said, the behavior just hasn't changed, Don, whatsoever. So I don't see anything changing. I see this as a continuation. And this was meant to be Trump, Biden, Trump.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
So
I got to get out of here in 5 minutes. So.
I don't disagree with most of what you said. And actually, although you might think that you do, you're not disagreeing with most of what I said, because the primary point I tried to make is that we have not had a strategic change. We've had a tactical change. And that's what you're describing. But the tactical change here, one of the tactics that it seems they were willing to use before that they don't feel secure enough to do now, is an all-out war with Russia. And to me, I mean, look, we're talking about a binary election, we're talking about a politics that is binary, period. You got two people, one of whom is going to be elected. There's 1,000 issues that matter. This guy, let's say there's just two issues. One, we're going to have a nuclear war, and the other, we're going to keep or do away with Social Security. Have a nuclear war or not, do away with Social Security or not. And I'll tell people right now, I live on Social Security. Among other things, I'm 71 years old. So you got two candidates. If one guy says, I'm going to not have a nuclear war, but I'm going to do away with Social Security, and the other one says, I'm going to have a nuclear war, but I'm going to continue Social Security, which one do you vote for? Is it a choice at all?
No, I get that.
Well,
but I'm saying it was meant to look that way.
I don't think it was.
It was meant to look like Donald Trump would at very least keep us out of war with Russia.
Well, no. Look, we were the Russians were telling us that we're getting closer and closer to a nuclear war. They're telling us that we're closer to nuclear war with them than ever since October of '62, and perhaps more so now. That's what they were telling us. And it's objectively speaking, unless, look, I said this a million times every time we talk, practically, Pasta, that everything that we think we know comes to us virtually, about all of this shit. I'm not on the front lines in Ukraine. I'm not in the back room in D.C. I'm not at the Pentagon, and I'm not in Moscow and all these places, in the places where these decisions are made. And I don't go home at night with the people who are in those rooms to see what their lives are really like. But it appears that, so in other words, I don't know if this is a shit show. The whole thing is a shit show. It appears that there was actually a war with Russia that Russia doesn't want to have at its doorstep, and that we brought it there. Okay, I think that much is real. It might not be. If it's not, if the whole thing is a shit show and Putin is helping Biden and Trump to screw us, that is possible. That's not what you're suggesting, right? That level of
I'm saying that could be a possibility. I don't know, but Putin also did say he'd rather have Biden as president than Trump.
Well, because the whole media for 8 years or whatever was telling people that Trump is Putin's puppet and that Putin's evil. So if Putin says, I want Biden, the assumption would be he's really trying to tell people, vote for Trump because now I like Biden. I don't know what any of that shit means. I saw that. But what I'm saying is there's real shooting going on. We did send the $100 billion, 9 figures, to however figures of billions of dollars of money to, 12 figures. Anyway, hundreds of billions of dollars there that disappeared. Who knows what the hell they bought with it. There's thousands of people being killed on the ground. There's all these claims about soldiers being killed. And when we were in Russia in March, a week or so on either side of it, there was a friggin' drone attack on the Kremlin.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay, these things are very dangerous in a world where you have the rhetoric that's been targeting Russia from here for a dozen years now or better, and the mobilization of forces all surrounding Russia and China that's been going on since Obama, certainly, and sitting on the other side of that, if really there is antipathy or antagonism or contradiction between Russia and the West, defending or knowing what's coming in when. I mean, they were at a hair trigger. They were all upset back in 1962 because the missiles in Cuba could hit the Washington, D.C. in like 12 minutes or whatever the hell it was. Those rickety ass rockets that are practically you pump the water into and they shoot off the top of the toy. Okay, what they have now surrounding and the Soviets we had the missiles in Turkey.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah,
we've got stuff now in Poland, in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Korea, and every goddamn place else. Cruise missiles that make those look like a joke, and that's just what we've announced. I mean, if we also have those hypersonic. And when I was in Moscow in 1990, they pointed to the building where the leadership, was at the top of the 30 stories, 50 stories, whatever it was, and said it takes 18 minutes to go from there to the hardened basement where those guys are safe against a nuclear attack. From the time they say go, 18 minutes before this closes the door. It takes 12 minutes for a cruise missile to launch from Germany and land here. That's 35 years ago, a siege mentality.
Mm-hmm.
What are they thinking now? So to me, the possibility of a nuclear war is real as long as it looks like it's real to the Russians. And if they don't see what we see, then I don't know what they're looking at. So I don't think it was illusion. And I think if that has backed off, and if they feel that it's backed off, I don't know what else primes that.
Like I said, I would still question too as well why Putin said he would rather have Biden. And I understand he would say that because of the whole the Russiagate thing it's really sad because they're reenacting that again. Rahm Emanuel was on Bill Maher a couple weeks ago and just saying Putin this, Putin that. It's like the same old playbook. But listen, if it takes 18 minutes to get in the cellar and only 12 minutes for the missile can get there, go halfway down and then just duck and cover. That's what you got to do. I got to go, guys. I love you, Don. It's so great to see you. Matt, thank you for having me on 100 episodes. You guys have fun. And I'm sure we'll see each other in the very near future. Love you guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
I'll take you out. That's all good. Oh, okay. Jamie Cheese Slice is on it. Very nice. He got it out.
Hey, Jamie, what's up, man?
He's oh wait, you know what? I think Craig just took himself out. Jamie will be back. There he is. There he is.
I'll see him.
Yeah, we'll bring him back in. We'll bring him back in. We're gonna do some stuff with Jamie in a little bit. But since I still have you for a little bit, Don, do we got another 10 minutes with you?
Yeah, 10 minutes is cool. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to piggyback off of this conversation we're having. And, we're talking about the difference between the Trump administration, second term, and what hypothetically would have been the Kamala administration. And the war machine effort, the thing that Trump ran on was ending wars, right? Ending particularly the Ukraine conflict, the Ukraine proxy war. He ran on being a peace president. We know how that's going in the Middle East overall, like exact opposite of that. How can we just ask ourselves, just kind of step back from the two-party duopoly here and just kind of look at the shift, the massive shift that happened with Trump on the military budget. I want to get your take on this, Don, because we saw this complete 180 where at first Trump wants U.S., China, and Russia to cut military spending in half. That was the peace language, the peace president vowing to end just kind of take down that budget, where And I'm going to let me just get this thing off of the top so people can see it. That sometimes becomes an issue, just a mathematical problem. Trump promises $1 trillion in defense spending for next year, $1 trillion. And he's saying this standing next to Netanyahu. That's not just somebody who put that picture there. He literally announced this an hour before Netanyahu showed up on the red carpet treatment, and the two of them posing there as Trump does the opposite of this. So my question to you, Don, is, considering all of the different 180s happening here with Trump, who's calling the shots here? Who's really in charge? Is it Trump? Is it the billionaire class? Is it Israel? Who's in charge of our military decisions and budgeting and day to day? Who's actually running stuff?
Well, okay. First, proposing cuts and following a regular budget track, they're not mutually exclusive.
Sure.
So, it's interesting to see someone propose cuts altogether. There's a lot hidden in that, by the way. and there's a number of things. For example, over time, I recall, I remember who it was, Carter, maybe even Reagan, proposing to do away with nuclear weapons to the Soviet Union, U.S. disarm nuclear. And the Soviet Union being reluctant to do that because they had a severe disadvantage in the context of a conventional war. They're surrounded, and so the battlefield, planning strategies really bore heavily on them. If they didn't have a nuclear deterrent, there was nothing to stop the West from just basically bombing the shit out of the Soviet Union with one wave after another conventional weapons, and marching from every corner and taking as much territory as they could. And so, you have Japan and Korea and Europe and the United States, all India, the whole bit. The same is with, you're looking at issues with respect to, a gross disarmament proposal might be a great idea. Okay, let's cut it in half. So what does that look like? Well, you could cut it in half by, for example, not buying any more weapons, period. That's not how it's going to go.
Sure.
You can cut it in half by not paying any more soldiers, and that's not how it's going to go. You could cut out, say, the nuclear triad. I don't know how much of a savings you would get. Let's say the whole delivery system. We don't need to maintain all these missiles and bombers anymore. Whatever it is, some aggregation of elements of these different things would be proposed, and there's a million different configurations that you could propose. Some are going to carry military advantages and disadvantages for one or more of the parties involved. Certainly, each of the parties proposing these things is going to be well aware of that, and going to be proposing things that look great to the public, and of course provide them a military advantage to be exploited, at some later date. The possibility exists that if you cut the budgets in half, you're more likely to have a war. Now, if you do away with nuclear weapons, you're more likely to have a global war. All of these things are part of the reality of this. I don't think it's an excuse for not doing it. I do think that when we look at how these things are treated in the media, we have to look at it, through the lens of this reality, though. And so when I'm looking at Trump, one last piece of this, I don't know what the budget was. Biden's last military budget was somewhere in the vicinity of $985 billion. In other words, just shy of $1 trillion.
Just shy of the trillion, yes.
And I know that my property taxes and the cost of food, gasoline, and everything else. Restaurant bills. I don't know if people have seen restaurant bills almost double in the last 2 years or something. All of that. I don't think the increase to $1 trillion military budget, in fact, is keeping up with inflation over last year's budget. It may actually be a cut in real dollars.
Wait. So you're saying that the $1 trillion hike is not aligned with
not a hike. Not a hike. $1 trillion budget.
The hike to $1 trillion, you're
Right.
saying, is not aligned with keeping up with inflation. Therefore, you could make the case that it's actually lowering our budget.
No, well, in real dollars. I'm saying that the last year's budget is like $985 billion.
Yeah.
You're talking about like a $15 billion increase over, in essence, $1 trillion budget
From a peace president, from a president
from whatever
who ran on
okay.
cutting.
All right. So the budget goes through the Congress. Okay. What was it called? Hang on a minute. There's a thing called Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act that was passed in 2017 when Trump was talking about sanctions relief for some of the people that we were squeezing. When he was talking to Korea, and when he was attempting to talk with President Putin and Russia, and while he's blustering at Iran, some people concerned that he was going to be talking with Iran also about some kind of sanctions relief or other. They passed a bill through both houses almost unanimously, way in excess of veto override, saying, in essence, no sanctions relief for Russia or Iran or North Korea unless we say so. The vote was like 411 or something in the House and like 98 or something, 97 in the Senate. Way past the 2/3 necessary for an override. In essence, major shifts in foreign policy, major shifts in terms of our military posture, etc., are not going to be done through the budget process. They're going to be done through a much larger political process that changes the dynamics politically. This reckless, crazy president is going to hack away at the military budget, just like he's hacking away at the budget for our U.S. aid and everyone else. You see how all that's being treated? Mm-hmm. How the fuck do you think they're going to treat the military budget, which is the golden honeypot of the entire purpose of this empire? That's where the money is. He ain't going to be able to do it like that. So I don't know what he really intends. It's a whole other matter.
Yeah.
For all I know, he's Satan and intends to do a world war and have idiots like us supporting him on the way. I don't know.
But what I'm suggesting, Don, in the question of who's in charge is that maybe he doesn't really have a say in this at all. He's just and I guess it really depends on, I want to put this up because this is about the money that was being made as Trump is posting about the stock market crash. Here's a good time to buy when it's low. And then he's congratulating the billionaires in the room. This is how you interpret this clip really shows how we look at how the system's run. Is this Trump? And I'm asking the viewers if you haven't seen this, or maybe you have, but watch it with an open mind. If your wife's watching at home, who's in charge when Trump is congratulating his billionaire friends? Is he the one doing this, or is he doing it on behest of them? Who works for who? That's the question. Here we go.
This is Charles Schwab. It's not just a company, it's actually an individual. And he made $2.5 billion today, and he made $900 million. That's not bad. He's a financial. I've always been following.
Okay, so obviously we saw a lot of the mainstream take that and go, look at him. He's, he got Adam Schiff on the Democrats. He's saying we got to start a campaign to get this guy out. This is worth we got to impeach. No president should have this power. I look at that clip, Don, and I think there's no power in that room under Trump. He's working for them. And this is the same. We would have seen the same thing in 2009 if there was Twitter or Truth Social back then, and somebody was filming in the corner when Obama was congratulating his bankers who were assigned to him to tell him what to do when it came to the housing market crash, which was the same principles involved. Make sure that you buy when it's low, and make these guys a bunch of money. Who is in charge in this room?
What you just saw has nothing to do with what Obama did. Well, this is after the fact. Trump did whatever he's doing. The announcements about tariffs and all of that, which he announced while he was running he was going to do, by the way. The people in that room saw what he announced. Whatever they do to have policy actualized, because I don't doubt that he, like every other person in that city, pretty much is on somebody's payroll or not. I don't. That aside, he did what he said he was going to do, and he started this whole thing about tariffs, and he's trying to negotiate with different countries to redivide the division of labor, of manufacturing and industry and all of this crap, but across the planet. And what happened as a response to it, when the markets happened, it had already happened at the time they were in that room. Those people not only know what happened and not only knew what was going to happen, most of them had their hand in it. This is what I was trying to explain before. The market is those guys. Your money, they vote it. You don't vote it. We independent investors, whoever we might be, very rarely, maybe people doing day trades, for what that's worth. But the bulk of this is traded institutionally, no matter who owns the actual equity. And so the manipulation of prices, when it's done particularly hand in glove with the media, like Bloomberg and CNBC and CNN, et cetera, those things are going to happen all by themselves, no matter what the fuck comes out of Trump's mouth. And what comes out of his mouth after the fact to this room full of people, I don't see the conspiracy there. What he's trying to do is grab some sort of, you got every moron in the universe saying that he's an idiot and doesn't understand anything about finance or business. You see, he's filed bankruptcy 4 times. What he's doing is irresponsible and crazy and all this kind of shit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's, 24/7 across the media. He's like, oh, by the way, while you people are all talking this crap, the guys who run the industry here, they made money. They know what's going on. That's what that is.
Which is different than Obama in 2009, you said?
That's different. Obama was hired to help close the theft of all the things that happened prior to the collapse. The war, you had 2 waves of this, right? Yeah, 3 waves, really. You go back to like my first, let's say, intercourse, involvement with mortgages was in the early 70s when I went into the title insurance business. And I'll use New York State as an example, because banking at that time was almost entirely a state business, state industry. Banks were licensed by the various states, primarily, and particularly mortgage banks. You had federal insurance of mortgages, FDIC, insured deposits. You had Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA mortgages, FHA mortgages, et cetera, but individual entities or even chains of banks were state enterprises. They were licensed by the states. They were subject to the banking departments in the individual states. The legislation affecting banking, how it worked, was state business. Large part of the mortgage business was savings and loans, or building and loans, as they called them also, which was basically the depositors in the community bought shares in the bank, by depositing. It didn't really change hands, but that was in essence what was happening. And then that money that was on deposit was loaned out to people for homes. And there would be a note and a mortgage signed by the borrower at the closing that was then delivered first to the recording office, so the public knows the mortgage is a lien on the property, and then would go to the bank, and it would be in a metal file cabinet in the president's office or in the vault or whatever, physical document. It's an asset. This $100,000 mortgage against half of the downtown back then, it is a physical asset of the banks. And when we're sitting here saying, what's this bank worth? We count up the face value of those things, among other things. That changed. Interest rates were fixed by the state. This is the important part. And at the time I first got involved in 1972, 73, it was 8.5% fixed rate mortgage in New York was residential, first home buyer mortgage. That was it. You couldn't charge more than that, or it was criminal usury. Banks at some point in time decided they weren't making enough money in that. Also, some very wealthy people decided they really didn't like the model of locals owning banks when they wanted to own all of them. And so a number of things happened both in the legislative front and also in terms of capital freezes and strikes that led over time first to a collapse of the savings and loans in the 1980s, where all kinds of fraud was done, and some very powerful people were involved in the fraud, including the Bush family, and no one really paid for that. And then once the business had been pretty much restructured so that these were now national and transnational entities that were the banks, like Chase and Citibank and like that. They went to a almost like a fee-based model for making money in the mortgage market. Number one, they charged fees for an application, for almost everything that happened over the course of obtaining a mortgage. Points, all kinds of other devices where they front loaded some of the interest costs and things where they would get cash at the beginning, or a severe discount in what they were paying. And it was rather, you're going to borrow $100,000, I'm going to charge you $10,000. Instead of you give me 10,000, I give you 100, I just give you 90 and you owe me 100. Whatever it was, that's called discounting. Because I'm going to turn around and now sell this mortgage to somebody for $90,000, for $100,000, and I still have the $10,000 you gave me. Because they were making money outside of the mortgage performing as a viable loan. In other words, you've got one model where I lend you money with an interest rate that's profitable for me, and you make regular payments for 30 years. I have a predictable cash flow here, and that's the value of this thing. I made a lot of money on that money I loaned you. They went away from that model. We don't give a frig if you pay it off or not 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, because we're going to dump the paper, your mortgage, into some big corporate pot out there. We make our fees up front, and then we make money when we sell the mortgage into this pot. Yeah. And so what happened was we didn't really care how good the appraisal was or how creditworthy the borrower was or a whole lot of other crap, even if the house existed in some cases.
Oh, yeah.
That we closed the loan and booked the fees, and everybody got their commissions in the office and everything else. And so that is what led to 2007, 2008. That and other things that inflated the real estate market. So before Obama comes in, the feds are looking at either the banking system collapsing or not just FDIC, but even more federal money going in to stand it up. And they went that summer in 2008 through a number of machinations in the Congress, including the Congress voting down a bailout. And because the Democrats were voting against the bailout. And Barack Obama, who was about to be, he just clinched the, what do you call it, the nomination.
They got the nomination. They
lobbied the Democrats in the Congress and basically forced them to vote for the bailout. So it turned out to be about $500 billion in the short term was handed to them, courtesy of Obama and Bush working together, because Bush had to sign the check, but Obama, bullied the Democrats in Congress, or whoever his puppeteer was, but he was the face of it. And then when he became president, he gave them, I think Glenn Ford calculated it was an additional $1.5 trillion in the first year.
Yeah, it was the too big to fail. That was the spin on it. But and again, I appreciate going through each element, and I just want to be clear, I wasn't making a literal comparison
No, I'm
to
just
what
saying
was going on in the housing industry in 08-09 to what's happening right now with the tariff war and all it's totally two different things economically. I was just saying, Don, that the comparison to me is you get rid of the old guard, you bring in the new one, and there's this idea that you've changed something when it's about the face changing. And then, like you said, that was the key part you said, was that you took the Democrats who were against when Bush was going to do it, and you switched them around and said, oh, now it's a Democrat leader, a guy that looks like us because he looked like us, and now you can get the thing done that you kind of ran out of gas on the Cheney Bush regime, and you had to switch it up. So I'm seeing something similar here, where Trump, although looks like he's coming in, being a person of the people are excited. We're taking on the deep state. When he gets in there, you're in that same room, you're in that White House, and you're talking to your bankers, and you're telling them what's happening. But are you telling them, or are you working for them? That was my only comparison. Two different economic scenarios. But that was where I was just kind of drawing that. But I think this is a very deep conversation we can continue in future episodes or future conversations on different shows that we go on. And I do appreciate everything all the details you bring on this discussion, Don. It's very insightful and much appreciated. Because we do have to get on with the rest of the show. Any last thing you want to leave us with on your way out?
No, I appreciate it. It's good to see you and nice talking, and I look forward to the next time. Look, at the very beginning, I said this to you and Pasta, that there wasn't a revolution. Mm-hmm. So those billionaires are the same billionaires that were billionaires last year and the year before and the year before and the year before, and the government is in their control. Maybe not those particular characters, but that class dominates, pretty much everything in this empire. And so, until you start, and even if they started dragging some of them out, I'm not advocating this, even if they started dragging some of them out and stringing them up, or, off with their heads or whatever they would do, even if it was, determined and proven that this is the whole class of them, unless you do away with the class itself, not just the members of the class, but the job description, influential billionaire, unless you do away with it, you just, it's deck chairs on the Titanic. So we haven't seen really that kind of fundamental change. Again, just to me, the thing that was really important up until we got rid of Presidents John Kirby and, the lot of them that went out with Biden and Harris, was that we don't have a nuclear war with Russia, or a major war with Russia or anyone else, like that kind of a war where they start blowing up the big stuff, and try to work from there, which is where we're at now for as long as this window is open. And so we do have a lot of work, and I'm sure Trump is not on our side for most of it. But we got to make sure also we keep the window open, lest Kirby and them come creeping back in and push the button. That's also a concern right now.
Yeah. Don DeBar, thanks for staying on top of everything globally. Just the humanitarian element too, which is so important. We have these very thoughtful discussions. Thank you so much once again, and tell people where they can find you.
Okay, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, what is it? Telegram, and Truth, whatever they call that Trump thing. Don DeBar, this right here.
Awesome. Thanks, Don. And I'm going to say one last thing. It just hit me. I need to tell you this on our 100th episode. You were the first. We communicated. You'd been on the show a couple times. First time I ventured outside of the once a week, because we used to just do the show once a week. That was it. Just very safe and just very focused.
Regular.
It was breaking news. It was when Trump got the first assassination attempt. I remember we were reaching out to each other, and I said, do you want to do this? Let's cover it.
Yeah, that's right. We did. Yeah.
So you helped us get out of our shell of that first, we have to only go once a week. That's it. And it allowed us to kind of expand. And while things are happening, let's cover it in real time. Let's figure this out. So I wanted to give you a shout out to that. You got us out of that safety zone and went into it. So that was awesome. And thanks. And it's been very inspiring ever since as well. So
thanks, Matt. You take care of yourself. Okay. I'll see you around.
You too. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Don DeBar, everyone. Thanks for being part of our 100th episode, everybody. If you've just joining us now, welcome. Thanks for being part of our celebration. We got more show. We got more